Hey Nerdologists, it's Monday and it is also Martin Luther King Jr. Day, and so what I wanted to do for this video was make a video listing 10 or so people who have influenced different equal rights movements. And when I think of equal rights movements, the first three that pop to my brain are the civil rights movement in the 60s and the women's rights movements and the right to vote in the early 1900s, and the current equal rights movement going on at the moment for LGBTQ. Do we add Q? I'm never quite sure, but that movement going on right now for equal rights with people who are homosexual or different sorts of gender and sexual identities at the moment. That's something that our nation seems to be dealing with. And so I started doing some research about influential people, people who have either worked to make a difference or they have somehow paved the way for people. And so I ended up with 12, and I made myself stop doing research then, otherwise this video would have been very long. It already might be kind of long. But, so I broke it up into those three sections, and we are going not chronologically. I decided to start with the civil rights movement because it is Martin Luther King Jr. Day. So I thought that we would start with Martin Luther King Jr. If you are an American or have lived in America for any amount of time, you probably are aware who he is. And if you don't live in America, you probably have heard his name at some point because he's a pretty influential person in the history of history. But he was in the 60s, and he was a minister who worked for equal rights. He did his I Have a Dream speech on the Capitol Mall, and he was a huge activist in the equal rights movement. A couple other people who are part of this movement are Mary McLeod Bethune. She created schools for black students and worked with several U.S. presidents to make sure that all children, not just black kids, got a good education. And she was actually way before the 60s, because the 60s were about having schools for kids all together, not schools just for black children and just for white children. So she was actually ahead of her time. Another person who was ahead of his time as far as equal rights go was Abraham Lincoln. There are a lot of good things about Abraham Lincoln and some not so good things about Abraham Lincoln with any president, but one thing that he did do was he was the president during the Civil War. He worked to join our our country back into one country after it split into two, and he worked to get rid of slavery. And then the fourth person I have for the civil rights movement is John F. Kennedy. He was the president during the 60s, and he helped pass laws that made it so that African Americans could vote and so that they could get a good education and so that we could end segregation in schools and public places and all over. And then moving on to women's rights, the four people I came up with is Susan B. Anthony. You really can't talk about women's rights and suffragists and the right to vote without Susan B. Anthony. She is the woman that was behind the movement. She's the one who drafted the 19th Amendment, which is the amendment giving women the right to vote. She tried casting votes as early as 1872. She tried to cast a vote in the presidential election, ended up actually going to jail. And then a precursor to Susan B. Anthony is Elizabeth Blackwell. She wasn't really a person who was an activist in women's rights, but she definitely paved the way for women. She was the first American woman awarded a medical degree by a college, and she was rejected by all the major medical schools in the nation because of her gender, and then she finally got into Geneva College in New York. Another person or another woman that paved the way for women to go into careers that aren't necessarily careers for girls is Amelia Earhart. I just realized I'm looking down. I'm not sure if I told you guys, but I have my laptop in my hands and I'm reading. That's why I'm not always looking at the camera. Sorry. But Amelia Earhart, she was a woman who paved the way in aviation. Most people know about her because she disappeared. But before she disappeared somewhere in the Pacific Ocean, she was the first person to fly across the Atlantic, or first woman to fly across the Atlantic Ocean. and she opened up the field of aviation to women, and she also opened up the fields of a lot of jobs to women which were not necessarily considered jobs that women could do. But if Amelia Earhart can do it, why not you? So that's a major reason that she is a part of this list of people. Plus, I'm just a really big fan of Amelia Earhart. And the fourth person in the women's rights is not a woman. It is Aaron A. Sargent. He was a senator during the late 1800s, mid to late 1800s. And he was the senator that introduced the 19th Amendment to Congress. It took them like another 40 years or something like that to pass it, but he was the one who introduced it and kind of got the ball rolling on the women's right to vote. And then moving on to the LGBT community and the equal rights movement that's going on right now, we actually can go back to 1897. I started doing research, and if you've noticed, a lot of these people are American, because that's my field of reference. This person is actually a German doctor, Magnus Hirschfeld. In 1897, he formed the Scientific Humanitarian Committee, which was a campaign to publicly go against this law called Paragraph 175, which made sex between men illegal. So as early as 1897, there was people campaigning against basically the bigotry and the homophobia and things like that. He was campaigning against treating people badly and different because they're different than you as early as 1897, and I'm very impressed by this man. Another person is Brenda Howard. She is known as the Mother of Pride. In the 60s, she organized a lot of the very first gay pride rallies and fairs and parades all over the nation. And then there was Harvey Milk. My frame of reference for Harvey Milk is that he was a politician in San Francisco, and he got killed, and one of our senators right now, I can never remember if it was Dianne Feinstein or Barbara Boxer, but California senators, is now a senator because she was an aide in his office, and his assassination inspired her to go into politics and to work for the public and try to make things better. But I did not know why he was assassinated. Turns out he was elected to the San Francisco Board of Supervisors in 1977, and he was the very first openly gay man in the United States to serve in public office, or elected to a public office. And then the last person of people that have been influential in equal rights in a variety of fields was Ted Kennedy. If you remember, I mentioned John F. Kennedy earlier. Ted Kennedy is John F. Kennedy's brother, and he was a senator for years, and he worked for a lot of his last years in office. He worked to repeal Don't Ask, Don't Tell. He actually passed away before Don't Ask, Don't Tell was repealed. If you don't know what Don't Ask, Don't Tell is, it's when if you are gay or lesbian and you're in the military, you can go into the military, but just you can't tell anybody because you're not supposed to really be there, but they can't ask you. So you can, like, as long as you keep it a secret and like hide your identity, you can go ahead and serve our nation. But if you don't, then leave, essentially. So that got repealed, and Ted Kennedy was a big push behind that. And those are my 12 people that are influential. In the comments, tell me who you find influential for civil rights or for any sort of activist movement. Just tell me people who you find to be influential or inspirational. Chelsea and Caroline, I'd love to hear if you guys have any people that you'd like to add to my lists. And also, I got a Christmas present from Caroline, and it's this necklace. It's really hard to tell, but it's a TARDIS, and there's another one that she gave me with the cover of my book, and they're awesome. So thank you, Caroline. I will see you on Wednesday. Bye.